Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and you're back for another episode. And you're in for a real treat today because I think I have a fellow geek, but I have a fellow auditor, and she's going to talk to us about auditing your audio and visual assets in a way that we have not considered before. So this is going to apply to a lot of people in compliance. It's going to apply to a lot of people in business. And she's an academician, and everyone knows I'm the son of an academician. So we're going to academic out. So with that long-winded introduction, Dr. Yolanda Nollie. Dr. Nollie, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I'm rather excited because it is my passion to audit in a way where it helps businesses and media scale from hobby revenue to high ticket sales revenue.
So I'm going to suggest that what you do is actually governance. And you may or may not agree with that, but I've had several conversations this week where the question has been, when do we put these controls in place, Tom? We're a startup. Have you ever tried to put a control in place after you have a $100 million company? No. Well, why don't you do it before you have a $100 million company? Because it's a whole lot easier. And so I was thinking about those conversations as they are not media asset companies I had these conversations with. And so I was thinking about that in context of what you advocate and how you advocate it. But before we get to some of the specifics, I was wondering if you could anonymously, to the extent you need to, talk us about some of the projects you've worked on from your perspective.
Absolutely. One of the projects that I'm working on right now is with Jerry Spencer, who's actually at Podfest in the 2026 Podfest. And right now, is a huge asset that he has, and which I have completed the auditing for it. In those terms, Tom, for the general counsel who's looking for ways that I audit those assets and protecting those IPs because they're very important, they're a huge asset, over saving millions of dollars when it comes to AI film assets. And from bringing it from 7 million to down to 2.5 million dollars just from doing a simple auditing and summary report on that specific IP and showing the summary in that report to the Nollie standard certified investors that I've audited as well, because I have to audit both sides to make sure that they are compliant. It's just very important that the compliancies are combed through like a fine-tooth comb, and making sure that every point is covered in that detailed report and the data is there, so that therefore when I'm transferring those reports confidentially and encrypted to both parties, they can see the report and it's confidential and it's encrypted, so that we're protecting everything that is transferred, and it is confidential. And then they can see the detailed report, because it's very important, as I explained to a lot of my perceived clients, that when they have a detailed report of a project or a media company, they can see that all the data is there, and the very least that they're looking for is the aesthetic. That's this very bottom of the totem pole, Tom. They're looking for that data. They're looking for all of the whole complete structure, to making sure that their ROI is not wasted. It's not a waste. There is a return of investment, and that's through a fine tooth comb data report and summary. So that is why my duty is so important. And sometimes it's a kind of a really lengthy conversation, because in explaining why it's important to the creator, because that the business side is so important, and having that data is so important, because investors need to see everything in order and according to the military grade. And that is why my job, my duty, and what I perform is so important, and giving the knowledge standard of what compliancy looks like, and to both parties, and making sure that the creator's IP is protected. And having that conversation with the investors. Like I actually have a conversation with an investor on the 23rd, the post oak group on the 23rd, and I'm doing an audit of their company and making sure that the standardized structure is there and that their reports are there. So I have to call in to see all of the reports, all of the tax forms, to making sure that all of the bells and whistles are there. And it's either a light or a more in-depth audit. And then once that is taking place, I do the data report and formalize the data report, have it encrypted for confidentiality purposes, and then send that over to the creative, to making sure that they have an understanding that either it was a pass or it was a fail. It was a fail. I'm not closing down the business. That's not what the audit is for. What I do is just to make sure that it is a formalized, detailed report that shows that this is a compliant investor, and that they're able to fund a project, and they're able to show that they have invested in the past. So that's some of the preliminaries that I have performed or currently performing right now.
So let me pick up on a word you use, and that word is duty. And I pick up on that word because my father, God rest his soul, just sent me a little message and said, "You're talking to a U.S. Navy veteran. Give her the due respect every Navy veteran deserves." And as you may guess, my father served in the U.S. Navy. So tell us about your Navy service and your academic background, which brought you to this point.
I served in the Navy back in the early 2000s. Early 2000s, I was still young myself in those days, and it was after I achieved my bachelor's degree in the arts. And after doing so, I went straight to taking the ASVAB, and was able to. I didn't pass the first time, I was gonna say, but I passed the second time, and I was able to then find my way to what my BOL was going to be, my specialty in the military. I was able to get a promotion while going in, and which was E3 in the military, in the Navy. And through that, I was able to get through the military boot camp, the foxtrot, all that, those duties. And then I was able to go through to get my MBA plus my doctoral degree and in arts and history. From that point, I've always was intrigued by creativity. That was my first passion. And my father's father, my grandfather, who served in Vietnam in the army, always would encourage me to go into the arts. He said, I think that's your strong point, but find out more about it. Just don't be something in the surface, and be more clinical, from a clinical standpoint, so that you can really elaborate on the fascinating history of the arts. So that's why I chose the arts and culture side of the art. Then I went into journalism, and I did a lot of freelance journalism for different broadcast companies, and then a little PR work as well. And then I went into representing a few public figures in media and entertainment. And after that, my podcast show, Radio and TV Entertainment, AMF and Podcast Show, which is a good run. We've done over 180 episodes. And I've interviewed a lot of those professionals in the entertainment industry. Tanya Pinkins was one of them. And I'm also a 9-time award-winning documentary producer and director with a group called Whole Lime Media LLC, and it's called Direct and Reflex. We have already released it on Apple TV, Google TV, and also Tubi. So it's on Tubi as well. And so that's my rundown of my background and history. Why I went into media governance, because I have the experience. I've been inside of the rooms where I can see that creatives and business alike have friction, because they're great on the creative side, but there's a lot of friction on the business side of things, unless it's a huge studio like Warner Brothers, or where they have a lot of the business people that handle a lot of the business mechanisms. But then also on the other side, there's the creative side is where all of the movie magic happens. But I see a lot of friction that comes to part when when a creative tries to blend the business side. It just doesn't work, that I found. So I feel that understanding the IP, the IP, protecting IPs and projects and podcasts to understand. I did the live audit or fold at Podfest. And there I did a live simulation and half the room failed, unfortunately.
Only half?
Maybe all, but I did see some of them not standing. So therefore I knew that most of them for a fact that they failed. Fortunately, if not all, but 500
So
people.
I, in your original answer and the detail you gave us, it was clear to me that when you produce a report and you sit down with an investor or potential investor, they're coming to you obviously for this audit information. And when you walk them through the information your audit uncovers, they understand controls, they understand ownership, and they understand what you are telling them. But I'm equally interested in how do you have that same conversation with a creative and explain to a creative, this is in your interest that we audit this, that we document the audit findings, and then if there's a gap, we put in a control or remediate as appropriate. How does that conversation go?
Screenplay clearance. I have a Bruce Nahan is well known in the entertainment as an entertainment lawyer. So when he's looking at screenplays, that's an asset, and he has to make sure that he can clear a screenplay because that can become a liability if he doesn't catch certain things within that screenplay. It cannot go to production if there's certain liabilities within that screenplay. So shadow IT is just a matter of making sure that there, for instance, unfunded liabilities, they cannot fund a project if there's a liability within it. That means that it will slow down the ROI, the return of investment, because now there are certain things that maybe an entertainment lawyer didn't catch, and now that's become more or less a problematic situation. It could slow down the production. It could slow down anything that the creative wants to exceed, and then it could slow down anything that could progress to be a high ticket revenue as well.
What's IP sovereignty and how does a creative protect their work around that concept?
So when it comes to their sovereignty, for instance, why I have to go and vet a company like the Post Oak Group. It's the sovereignty, it's the protection of the asset. So, in a 100 million plus pipeline, a single missing release or unverified AI generative pixel can freeze a transaction. We apply the PMP rigor to ensure the chain of titles is documented. And in a real time, documented in real time, we move from a forensic cleanup after the copyright inoculation at the point of creation. At that point,
And then what is copyright inoculation?
so the copyright inoculation, basically, that's a kind of like a clinical term where if the let's say it's a copyright, that's a legal document. It's legally documented now. It documents that that particular person, that creative owns the rights, now owns the rights to their video content, to their soundbite, to the Tom Fox show, per se. You own the right. It's copyrighted. So therefore, if one person says, I own the rights to the show, no, whoever owns copyright owns the piece, owns it's the property. They own that asset. So yeah.
So what you've got another great phrase that I wanted to ask you about, and that's called operational drift. What's operational drift and where does the compliance angle come in to either prevent, detect, or even stop this?
As I elaborated, it's that providence is the liability. It's the liability. It's the so it doesn't slow down The creative, we don't want, when I go in to help a creative, I don't want it to slow down. I don't want it to drift. So therefore, when I'm doing the auditing, when I'm performing the auditing, and when I have my partners, an attorney to look over their assets, their sound bites, their pitch, that is included as well. Everything is included because we want to know that it's, even though it's public, it's for public use, that they can still utilize it. They can still utilize it in their film or their, even if it's a generative AI film, it has to be reviewed and audited to make sure that there's not a liability attached to it.
Can that audit be done internally by a compliance team? Did I need to bring in an outside expert such as yourself, or is there a hybrid model that you can work with?
It's a hybrid model. For instance, I had a conversation with the owner of Omniverse City. So yes, she had a technical audit, a general technical audit, and she said that they went through all of the technical assets. So therefore, once she was open to say that, unfortunately, I had to explain, yes, you have that report, but sometimes it's only for a specific reason that they've completed that audit, that technical audit. Now, if you're doing it from a to get international funding and show that you have all of the technical audits performed already and it's a year old, it's still good to do a fresh review and make sure that it's still compliant for international processes as well.
So you've got a great term called decision rights mapping. And here my question is, I certainly understand downstream from decision rights where you would map not only the holder of the rights, but final fiduciary sign off. But what about upstream? Do you have to look at the provenance of how rights are created or where they were created so that it's a sort of a continuum of review?
So it's it's the chaos. The chaos is expensive. Architecture is profitable. So scaling failure usually happens at an intersection of who can decide and who can execute. Decision rights mapping isn't about bureaucracy. It's about fiduciary clarity. So it's knowing exactly who holds the signature authority for asset clearance before the first dollar of the production capital is spent.
And then this next topic is perhaps the most ubiquitous topic in all of compliance now, and it's AI governance. And as I talk to compliance professionals, literally in every industry across the globe, they are getting pressured to figure out AI governance. And the pressure, of course, is coming from senior management. And they're turning to compliance because they believe compliance officers have experience in governance. And I think that's a fair belief. But how do you help the people in your industry think through AI governance given its ubiquitousness and where people may be off using AI and somebody doesn't know it?
Absolutely. So the risk today isn't just AI itself, it's the citizen developer, the employee using the generative AI on a personal device to create corporate assets. Without a governance infrastructure, you are importing the infrastructure, the importing of the black box data into their enterprise. My solution is embedding the governance. So where the technical guardrails are built into the tool set, ensuring the compliance is an automated byproduct of the creative process. So that's where it fits.
And then how do you, once you put the framework in place, do you train employees on that framework? Do you train them on the guardrails and then monitor the results of that training as you implement it, or is it a different type of process?
It is what I call the blueprinting, the customized blueprint, because every government body is different. They have a different, every structure is different for every creative processes. Internalizing that traditional compliance is a gatekeeper model. It stops the flow. It stops the flow. And as a media governance architect, I build the sanctuary for innovators. So when I create that blueprint, it's customized to their either specific issue or their project or their production companies.
So you've also used the term that frankly is a little scary, I think, to most people, and that's fiduciary duty. Most compliance officers don't think of what they do as a fiduciary duty. And I'm not here to debate whether it is or isn't, but there are fiduciary duties in every corporation at the board of directors level, at senior management level, and down within the company. So how do you help, number one, educate on the fiduciary duty, and then help them to put together a risk management strategy around that risk?
So in a $100 million chain of title, documenting in real time. We move from forensic cleanup after the fact. The, and from there, we go and we have a conversation when it comes to their assets and making and doing and conducting that assessment, because it's like going into a doctor's office. The doctor doesn't know the underlying chief complaint. He has to have that conversation first with the patient. That will be the business, or that will be the production company or creative. So once we do an assessment, then we can find out where are the holes. Where are the holes that need to be filled to have a stronger foundation? And from there, from that assessment, we go into, which is part of the audit, then we go into formalizing the detailed summary report, the body issues, and then, or the product issues. Like for example, Jerry Spencer's project, the AI film, and finding where are the holes. Is it a legal issue that we need to find first to catch it first? Is it, and then from there, we go and we build out that blueprint. That is their world map. So that world map is where we architect and customize a way to heal anything that's left over from those elements, from that structure. And then from there we find a way that it can be automated, from before, automated, mitigated, and mitigated before and then even after the execution.
So when you sit down with a client or even a prospective client, who are you talking to? Are you talking to the board? Are you talking to C-suite? Are you talking to a chief compliance officer slash general counsel? All of the above or none of the above?
All of the above. They all have important parts. They all are the important parts to the body. And without going through each one, we can miss a compliancy issue. They're all important.
Dr. Nollie, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if any of our listeners wanted to connect with you or find out any more information about your work or your consulting business, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
Certainly, they can follow up with me on LinkedIn. I'm under Dr. Yolanda Nollie on LinkedIn, PMP, as well as they can go to my website, Dr. Yolanda Nollie, PMP, Centra.com.
Dr. Nollie, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me. I have learned a lot from this podcast, and I know my listeners did too. I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Likewise, Tom. And for the general counsel who suspects that they have a shadow IT problem in their creative department, we don't start with overhaul. We start with phase one infrastructure audit. The process is forensic and non-invasive. Decision rights mapping, we identify exactly where the fiduciary sign-off is falling between the creative suit and the legal office. In AI copyright inoculation, we can scan the current production workflow to catch the unmanaged generative AI use before it becomes a permanent line item liability. So the goal, we move from the expensive chaos to the audit ready posture. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.